Atheism has an unsolvable moral problem. Now, you might be thinking, we don't need God for morality. Science and evolution explain it just fine. And you're right, the evolutionary argument is incredibly powerful. In fact, we're about to build the strongest possible scientific case for why we are moral beings without any gods at all. But then you'll see why even that powerful explanation completely fails to solve the problem of real, objective right and wrong. And why, from a strictly atheistic worldview, objective morality cannot exist. It's a delusion. Section 1. The Steel Man. Let's start with something we should all agree on. To have an honest conversation, you have to build up the other side's best argument. So let's build the strongest case science can offer for where morality comes from. The argument begins with a simple fact. Humans are social animals. And for us, cooperation is everything. It's how we survived. The fields of evolutionary biology and psychology argued that you can see the seeds of our own morality in other social animals. First, there's altruism. We see it everywhere. A bird gives a warning call that puts it in danger to save its flock. A vampire bat shares its food with another bat that couldn't find any. These aren't conscious moral choices, but they're the building blocks. This is explained by things like kin selection. It's a natural instinct to protect your family before a stranger, ensuring your shared genes get passed on. Then there is reciprocal altruism, which is just a technical way of saying, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. These behaviors help the group survive. They're adaptive. Now, building on that, as human societies got more complex, cooperation became even more critical. Our ancestors, who were better at empathy, fairness, and building trust, were the ones who thrived. Natural selection would have favored this. It's as if our brains evolved a kind of moral software. We developed a gut feeling for right and wrong because it was an essential tool for navigating our social world. Here's the final piece. Your brain. Modern neuroscience is actually mapping the circuits that light up during moral decisions. When you feel empathy or guilt or anger at injustice, those aren't just ideas. They are biological, neurological events. That feeling you get that something is deeply wrong isn't just a thought. It's a physical response, perfected over millions of years to keep us from destroying each other. So, there it is, a powerful, compelling scientific case that our sense of right and wrong is a product of mindless evolution. It grounds our morality firmly in the natural world. It doesn't need a god, but here's the problem. Even this incredibly strong explanation has a fatal flaw when it comes to what we all know to be true. That some things are objectively right and wrong. To see why, we have to talk about one of the most famous ideas in philosophy, the is-ought problem. The philosopher David Hume pointed this out. You cannot get an ought from an is. In other words, a statement about what is true about the world can never by itself lead you to a conclusion about what you ought to do. Think of it like this. Science can give you a perfect recipe for a chocolate cake. It can tell you what is in it: flour, sugar, eggs, but the recipe itself cannot tell you that you ought to bake it. It can't tell you that you ought to share it. To get to that OT, you need an external goal or value, like wanting to be a good host. Science is brilliant at telling us what is. It can describe evolution in perfect detail. It can tell us our moral feelings are the product of brain chemistry. But science can never tell you that you ought to survive, or that you ought to care about your species. A scientific fact like this action causes pain doesn't logically force the conclusion. Therefore, you ought not do it. To get to the OT, you have to bring in an outside moral rule, like the rule that causing needless pain is wrong. And this is exactly where the atheist evolutionary explanation breaks down. It masterfully explains what is. It explains how your moral brain chemistry came to be. But it can never tell us what ought to be. This is where it gets uncomfortable. If evolution is the only explanation for morality, it leaves us with some unavoidable and deeply problematic conclusions. First, evolution doesn't give us a reason to believe our moral feelings are true. It explains why you feel that torturing a child is wrong, but it cannot tell you that torturing a child is objectively wrong, independent of how you feel about it. This is what philosophers call the evolutionary debunking argument. Imagine you were born with a special pair of glasses you can never take off. These glasses were designed for only one purpose: to help you survive. They highlight food and tint dangers red. Natural selection doesn't care if the glasses show you the world's true colors. it only cares that they work. Our moral sense is like those glasses. It might help us survive, but we have no reason to believe it shows us true right and wrong. It just shows us what's useful. This gives the atheist a choice, sometimes called the Darwinian Dilemma. Either the moral colors you see through your survival glasses have nothing to do with reality, or the world, by sheer unbelievable coincidence, just happens to be colored exactly the way your glasses show it. This means you have no reason to think your deepest moral feelings are anything more than survival instincts. Second, the evolutionary argument collapses when you think about moral progress. If morality is just what's advantageous for the group's survival, how can we make sense of things like abolishing slavery or fighting for civil rights? Those were struggles against the accepted rules of their society. The moral reformers weren't just following evolutionary impulse, they were appealing to a higher standard. They were like a ship's navigator appealing to the North Star. The fleet's current direction is the way things are. The North Star is a fixed point that tells them where they ought to be. If morality is just about survival, then a highly efficient slave state could be seen as moral. Yet you know deep down that slavery is objectively wrong. The evolutionary account can describe that your feelings changed, but it can't say that change was objectively good. And that brings us to the third and final conclusion. If atheistic evolution is true, morality is a useful illusion. The atheist philosopher Michael Ruse was honest about this. He said, "Morality is a biological adaptation, no less than our hands and feet and teeth." He argued that ethics, as we understand it, is an illusion fobbed off on us by our genes to get us to cooperate. Think about what that means. It's like a parent telling a child that a monster will get them if they don't eat their vegetables. The story isn't true, but it achieves the goal. That feeling you have that compassion is good and cruelty is evil. It's not you recognizing a deep truth about reality. It's a trick. Your DNA is telling you a useful fairy tale to get you to cooperate. In this worldview, there is nothing actually wrong with a person who commits horrific acts and gets away with it. They're just acting against their programming. Their actions aren't objectively evil, they're just not good for the species. But why ought an individual care about the survival of the species if they can serve their own interests instead? Evolution has no answer. Pause for a second. Which worldview actually fits the reality that you experience every day? Comment below. I read every one. So, where does this leave us? We've seen that the evolutionary argument is powerful. It gives a scientific account for why you have moral feelings. It explains the is of your brain chemistry, but we've also seen that it fails to do the one thing it needs to do: provide a foundation for objective moral values. It cannot give you the ought. It leaves you with morality as a useful fiction, a survival tool with no more real authority than the instincts of a wolf pack. It tells you your deepest convictions about right and wrong are just genetic illusions. It can't tell you that getting rid of slavery was actual moral progress, only that social norms changed. And it gives no ultimate reason why anyone ought to be good. And that is atheism's unsolvable moral problem. It can explain the feeling of morality, but in doing so, it explains it away. It can tell you why you believe in right and wrong, but it forces you to conclude that those beliefs don't point to anything real outside of your own mind. Without a transcendent standard, you're left with nothing but preference. So I'll end with the question you need to answer. If you are an atheist and you believe some things are objectively right and wrong, where does that objectivity come from? How do you get from what is to what ought to be? New videos every week tackling questions like this. Subscribe if you want to think deeply.